Hilchos Me'ila Perek Shvi, the laws of sacrilege, misusing consecrated items, chapter 7. If you hear some noise in the background, that's just some construction that's going on in the shul, so we'll forgive that. The main topic of today's chapter is shlichus, agency. How does agency interplay with the laws of Me'ila? Of course, the basic law of Me'ila states that if I use something which is holy, dedicated to God, for my personal use, I've misappropriated hektish and I transgress the prohibition of Me'ila. The question is, what happens if I appoint somebody else to do so on my behalf? Willfully or maybe even inadvertently. I give him some money that I didn't realize it was holy money. He goes and buys something for me. He did my agency, he did my mission, but there was a Me'ila component involved. So typically, when it comes to all of the Torah, we have a basic rule that says, Ein shliach lidvar avera. You cannot be an agent for a sin. You tell somebody, go hurt somebody, or go kill somebody on my behalf, and they go ahead and they do it, they are acting on their own accord. They can't relate that action back to the sender and say, oh, I was just an agent. No such thing as an agent when it comes to doing a sin. As the Talmud says, divrei harav, divrei hatalmid, divrei mishayman. If you get a commandment from a teacher and a commandment from a student, who do you listen to? Obviously the teacher. If Hashem says don't do it and the sender says do it, that's not a reason for you to go ahead and do it, and you can't blame him if you did. Therefore, by Me'ila, the same law would apply. If I send somebody to do the sin of Me'ila, that sin cannot be traced back to the sender. It needs to be owned fully by the agent. However, this is where a very special and unique rule comes in, that by Me'ila, specifically by Me'ila, different to the entirety of the Torah, there is validity to that which the agent does. The agent is considered to be acting on behalf of the sender, so that the Me'ila gets traced back to the sender. In most cases, provided, as we'll see, that the shliach did exactly what he was commanded. As long as the agent sticks exactly to his mission, he can later on, if it's discovered that Me'ila was done, he can trace that back to the sender, and the sender will have to own the consequences of that misappropriation. That's the basic principle that's going to guide us basically through most of the chapter. We're also going to get into some cases where a store owner is involved, a third party, there's the sender, there's the agent, and then he went and bought something in a store, and perhaps a store owner will end up using the holy money for the wrong reasons and how that works out. But that's basically where we're heading today, all of the laws of shlichus, agency, as they play into the laws of Me'ila. Says the Rambam halacha aleph, misha shagag. A person acted inadvertently, v'lakach hektish, or ma'is hektish, he takes either a hektish object or hektish money, and he gives it to an agent with the express instruction that the agent spend it and use it as if it were mundane. So even though usually, again I repeat, even though usually the agent is now considered to be acting on his own, having done a sin, but over here by Me'ila we have a special law. If the agent follows out his agency, his mission, to the T, what we say is that it's the sender that committed Me'ila, not the agent. If he doesn't fulfill his mission exactly, rather he acts on his own, in any way, shape, or form, he must own the consequences of his own actions. It is the shliach, it is the agent who has committed Me'ila. And we get now a couple of examples to see how this plays out practically. Ketzad, how does this look like? Baal abayis sha'amar lishluchai. Let's imagine an owner tells a waiter. He's an agent, is a waiter. Tein li, or the word li is in parentheses, should be deleted. Tein me oisei basar la'erchem. Please serve this meat to my guest. Halach v'nasan lahen kikar. And the waiter goes, instead of giving meat, he gives bread. And it's discovered that both the meat and the bread were holy. They shouldn't have been used for mundane purposes. But notice what happened. The agent changed. He gave bread instead of meat. Or the owner gave the instruction to give bread, and he goes and gives meat. Again, even if it's discovered that the meat is holy, he cannot trace back his actions to the sender. He changed the mission. Amar lishluchai, if the owner would tell the agent, in this case the waiter, please bring me the food from the windowsill. And he brings him food from the cabinet. Or he says, bring me from the cabinet, brings him from the window. In either case, if any Me'ila is discovered here, who needs to own it? Hashliach mo'al. It's the agent that's considered to have committed Me'ila because he deviated from his mission. And the same is true in all similar cases. On the other hand, if he did what he was told, If the agent went and brought the food from the window as he was told, even if later the sender says, oh, I totally mixed it up, I never had intention to bring from the window, I always wanted to bring from the cabinet, still the agent followed his mission, and so the owner is the one who commits me'ilah, because he did the agency of his word. Whatever you said, that's what he did. The fact that you have different matters in your heart is of no consequences. In all of halacha, things that are going on in your mind, if you didn't express them verbally, pretty much don't matter. Says the Rambam, this novelty of me'ilah applies even further. Even if the agent in this case was a deaf mute, a mentally unstable person, or a child, where usually the whole law of agency doesn't apply to them. You cannot appoint a deaf mute person to go and marry a woman for you, or to go do any kind of business transaction for you. Neither can you get a mentally unstable person or a child. If they became the agent in this scenario of me'ilah, and they did what you said, the owner is considered to have committed me'ilah. If they didn't do the agency, the owner is exempt. Of course, the Rambam doesn't use the words that the shliach will be obligated, because in this case, the deaf, mute, mentally unstable child, they cannot be held accountable for their own actions anyways. The point is that the owner will be exempt, it won't be traced back to him. Amar lishluchai, let's consider the following scenario. The scenario where the shliach both did what he was told, but also changed or added to what he was told. Amar lishluchai, a person tells his waiter, his agent, look, I don't have so much food today, please give the guests only one piece of meat each. The agent goes, the waiter goes, doesn't care, he tells the guests, listen guys, there's tons of food, please, everybody take 2 pieces of meat. So now how do you look at it? On the one hand, what the owner said was done. Every guest got 1 piece of meat. Of course, the case is that it was discovered that this meat is now hektish. So they all ate hektish meat. The point is, that the sender's word was done because everyone got 1 piece of meat. But the agent also added another piece of meat. Says the Rambam, in this case, only the owner is considered to have done me'ilah, because his word was fulfilled. The hashliach pater and the agent is exempt, because all he did was add to the mission of the owner. He never uprooted, he never changed the mission of the owner. But if the agent were to say, kind of an honest waiter, he goes, you know what? The owner told me only to give you 1 piece of meat. But I take responsibility upon myself. It's on me. Take 2 pieces of meat. Now shneyan ma'alu. Now both the owner and the agent committed me'ilah. The owner committed me'ilah because his instruction of getting 1 piece of meat was done. But the agent here actually changed the shlichus. He said, no longer is the owner responsible for his actions, I'm responsible. You take 2 pieces of meat on me. So in a way, he owns both pieces. So the me'ilah is traced back to him. What if the guests are even more greedy? And they go, you know what? The waiter said 2, we'll take 3. The guests also have committed me'ilah. Because in this scenario, each of the people did what was given to them, did the mission, but they also added on their own accord. So the friend, in other words, the owner or the sender or the waiter, is going to be liable because his words was done without his words being uprooted. But the next person is obligated because he added something on his own accord to what the previous person had given him. Halacha Beis says that Rambam, this whole scenario of meat, when does it apply? If the cuts of meat were from an animal that was sanctified for temple upkeep, it wasn't an actual sacrifice. Somebody gave an animal to sell for the proceeds to be used for temple maintenance. It's lower level sanctity. But if it was actual burnt offering meat, an animal is supposed to be actually offered. There's another issue at play here. There's an issue of eating holy meat that shouldn't be eaten at all. Nothing to do with me'ilah. Nothing to do with misusing holy objects. Just period. You shouldn't eat oila meat. You shouldn't eat burnt offering meat. And the whole idea that I introduced this chapter with, that there's a special novelty by me'ilah, that even though usually there's no shliach for sins, here there is that novelty is only true if the only issue at hand is me'ilah. The moment you throw in another issue into the mix, we revert back to the general rule of all of the Torah, where there's no agency for Averas, and therefore the whole agency here is completely cancelled. As the Rambam says, Shahari uchayav be'isar acher yeser ala me'ilah. In this scenario, if a person were to eat burnt offering meat, he's liable on a different count for a different prohibition, over and above the me'ilah issue. The rest of the Torah, we go back to the rule that there's no agency for sin. So nobody in the hierarchy could be held accountable except for the last guy who actually consumes the meat. Because the whole Torah has the rule of no agency for sins, only in the case of me'ilah where it stands alone and no other prohibition is mixed into it. Here you mixed in another prohibition, we only hold accountable the person who ate the problematic meat. Halacha Gimel, let's consider another scenario of agency. A person is holding a coin or some money belonging to hektish. Well, actually the word pruta is very exact here. So we'll use the word pruta. He gives a pruta, which is the minimal amount of me'ilah. Right? Remember in chapter 5, every time you benefit from hektish, in order to classify as me'ilah, you had to have derived benefit, the worth of a pruta. So the sender gives a pruta of hektish money to the agent. The Amar Lei tells him, Haveli bechetzia neiros u bechetzia psiles. Please, use half the pruta to buy me candles, half the pruta to buy me wicks. So if he does what he was told, he's about to use an entire pruta of hektish money for mundane purposes. But remember, the instructions were clear. Half wicks, half candles. And the agent goes and brings him a pruta worth of candles or a pruta worth of wicks. All for candles, all for wicks. Or the opposite. The instruction was, use this whole pruta to buy me only candles or only wicks. Comes the agent and goes, half wicks, half candles. So now watch what happened. Technically, half of the agency has been fulfilled in either scenario. If the owner said, give me half candles, half wicks, and he bought only candles, so he used half the pruta for candles. Amama, he used another half also for candles. But half of it was done. So this looks like the scenario from the other halacha where there was me'ilah here, because at least part of the shlichus was done. Says the Rambam, no. In this case, shneim pturim, they're both exempt. Balabayis leimal, even the owner, who in the case of the meat was held liable, he's not held liable here. Because while part of his agency was done, there was never a pruta worth of his agency that was done. Only half a pruta worth was done. Neither can the shliach be considered to have done me'ilah. Even though he changed part of the shlichus, but it was only half a pruta worth. In the other half a pruta, he fulfilled his agency. And therefore, nobody could be held accountable. But maybe, what if the owner would have told him, I want you to get half wicks, half candles, but he labeled the place. Get me half wicks from this store, half candles from that store. Then even if he stuck to it, and he used half of it for candles, half of it for wicks, but he switched the places, he bought the wicks from here and the candles from here, hashliach mal, then the agent did me'ilah, because he changed a full pruta's worth of the shlichus. Yes, he got the final product correctly, but he got it in the wrong place. So the agency is undone for both parts of the pruta. Halacha dalid, nasan leishtei prutais, if the owner gave the agent two prutas. The amar loy haveli esrik, and he tells him to the agent, bring me an esrik. The agent goes, and instead of buying a better esrog for two prutas, he buys what seems to be a lower quality esrog for one pruta, and he gets also a pomegranate for one pruta. You know, it's funny, I remember learning this halacha many times, and I always wondered why the example of esrog and pomegranate. But now I'm thinking about it, here we are between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is pomegranate time, Sukkot is esrog time. Many people buy their esrog before Rosh Hashanah even. So maybe this took place before Rosh Hashanah. The guy said, hey, go get me an esrog. I heard the esrog store is open. And the agent goes, you know what? You also need a pomegranate for Rosh Hashanah dinner. So I'm going to buy you two. I'm going to buy you an esrog and a pomegranate. So here, again, we could think that part of the shlichus was done. Because he got in the product, he got in the esrog. Says the Rambam, no, hashliach mal, it's the shliach fully takes the consequences. Ubalabayis pater, the owner is exempt. Because he didn't send him to buy an esrog. He gave him 2 coins to buy an esrog. It means he wanted a fancier esrog. You bought me a 1 pruta esrog, you bought me a different category product. You bought me a lower level product, lower grade product. Lefichach, therefore, by the way, says the Rambam, if indeed the guy didn't get a lower quality, he just bargained them down. He got a $2 esrog, a 2 pruta esrog. For 1 pruta, shneim aldu, they both committed me'ilah. Because in this case, at least half, and which is a pruta's worth, of the agency was fulfilled on behalf of the owner, so he also must suffer the consequences of me'ilah. Halacha hey, hasheleach pruta biad shluchai liknes leba chayfetz. Oh, here it is. Esrog and pomegranate. Okay. Halacha hey, hasheleach pruta biad shluchai liknes leba chayfetz. A person sends a pruta in the hands of an agent to buy him an object. Go to the store, buy me something. V'nizkar ba'al habayis shehi hektish kedem shetagia li'ad hachenveni. Guy's on the way already. The owner's still at home. And then he realizes, oh my goodness, the money I just sent him is hektish money. It didn't even reach the hand of the store owner yet. It wasn't, the money wasn't spent yet. Hashliach mo'al. By virtue of the fact that the owner remembered, he removes himself from the equation. He is what's called a mazid. He's acting purposefully, in a way, when it comes to me'ilah. In which case, as we saw in chapter 1, there's no sacrifice, there's really no kind of practical liability. So therefore, the shliach carries the weight now. He did me'ilah shahu shaygeg because he is exempt, because he's inadvertent, he's acting by mistake. The owner already remembers. A person acting willfully doesn't have to bring a sacrifice from me'ilah, as we explained. Nizkar af hashliach, if on the way, the agent also remembered, and he remembered that it's hektish before it reaches the hands of the store owner. They're both going to be exempt from the sacrifice. And if the store owner will spend the money, he will be liable when he spends that coin that mixed into his cash. Because he's inadvertent. He's acting without knowing. If later on they notified the store owner also that the money that they gave him was hektish money, shlashta and pturin, they're all going to be exempt because they're all acting out of knowledge. The nitvas hamekach lehektish, and the product, whatever was bought with hektish money, just is transferred back to hektish ownership, and that's how they take care of or repair this issue. Halacha vav v'keitzad yaseh kedei lahatzel hachenveni min hachet. End of the day is another issue here. So what if the product goes to hektish? There's a coin, a hektish coin sitting in the store owner's cash register that belongs to God, mixed into his pile of money. What do you do to save the store owner from sin? So he can now use all the money. Says the Rambam, you can do a trick. As we've seen when it comes to Ma'aser Sheni, you can transfer holiness. You take a pruta of regular money, or a regular utensil, and you say, the coin of hektish, wherever it is, should transfer its holiness to here. This new coin or the new utensil becomes holy. And now the owner can use, store owner can use all of his money. And by the way, nothing to do with the store owner. Same thing can be done in other scenarios. If you're in your own house, one coin of hektish mixes into your wallet. Now you have a whole wallet full of coins. One of them is hektish. What do you do? Or you said about your own wallet, you said one coin on my wallet is holy. Which is holy? How are you going to figure out? They're all holy now, out of doubt. So you can do the same trick. You simply transfer the holiness to another coin and then use the wallet. If you spent the coins without doing the transferring, since every coin is under doubt, we can't hold you actively accountable till you spend every last coin. Only once you spend every last coin, then we'll say, hey, by default, you must have spent one coin of hektish. But as long as you didn't, we won't hold you accountable. Halacha zayin amar, if a rich person says, kis mi kisai hektish, one of my many sacks of money is holy. V'sher mi shvarei hektish, or one of my oxen is holy. Mayalin bekulan or mayalin b'miktasan. Me'ilah applies to all of them and even to part of them. You don't know which was holy, they could all be holy. Ketzad oisa, what do? Maybe as hagadol shebahem, here you can't really bring another one and transfer the holiness because you don't know which sack it was or which ox it was, how much is the worth. So you must take the biggest one, the biggest sack or the biggest ox, the oimer, and you say, im hektish hu arehu hektish. If it was originally consecrated, great, it's holy. V'im lav, if not, ha hektish b'chol makom shehu mechulal al zeh, wherever the holiness is, let it be transferred to this. And that's okay because you're in this case appreciating hektish's value. You're giving them more than what they originally had. And you can use the smaller one, the lesser worth one, the smaller bag of cash. When somebody commits me'ilah on an amount of money less than a pruta, bein bezadin, bein bishgaga, whether purposefully or inadvertently. Mishalem esakeren ve'einei chayav chemesh v'le carbon. As we explained in chapter 1, you only pay back the principal. You don't have to make any other restitution of a fifth or a sacrifice. V'yirah says the Rambam even further, she'einei loike al pachis mishave prutayim hayamezid. It seems to me that you don't even get lashes for less than a pruta's worth, even if you acted willfully, because the whole obligation of me'ilah only applies from a pruta and upwards. Halacha tes hamafkid mois etzel ba'al habayis v'nishtamish bahen v'hoitzi. A person deposits money for safekeeping by a store owner. Let's say you went to a hotel, you had a wad of cash you wanted to put in a safe deposit box. You deposited the cash. The owner doesn't ask you. He knows you're going to be gone for 2 months, so he uses the money. He's confident he'll invest it, get some money back, and he'll put it back. But he used it and it was hektish. Ba'al habayis mal, the owner commits me'ilah. You deposited money for safekeeping. He doesn't have permission to use them. The owner of the deposit never gave him permission. But that's only for a regular guy. If you deposited them by a money changer or by a store owner, these people already had more assumptions or more presumptions that they would use your cash. Unless you made a specific sign, they were by default assumed to have your permission to invest your money. If they weren't sealed or tied in a specific way, since by law these people have your permission to use your money, if he spends it, both of you are exempt. The owner of the deposit is exempt. He never told him clearly. Yeah, there's a default assumption, but he never said for sure you can use them. Neither is the store owner obligated because they're not tied in an interesting way. They're not sealed. So it's as though he used it with permission. If a woman brings in hektish money into the marriage to her husband, or her heir, the person bequeathing to her, somebody who she could inherit from, her father, let's say, made something holy and he died. So now she has hektish in inheritance. So the Rambam teaches us that even though typically you might assume that the husband should be considered to be acting as the agent of the wife, and therefore if he does anything with this hektish stuff, she'll be the one to carry the me'ilah consequence. Says the Rambam, no. Since the woman didn't give a direct instruction, like the previous case of the money changer, if the husband spends the money on his own needs, yimal, he's considered to carry the consequences of me'ilah, because in a way, he acted on his own accord without getting permission from the wife.